a lot of the team go out often to train the people on how to do shooting. But the irony is that 360 video, especially, is easier to shoot than two-dimensional content because you're just putting the camera down and pressing go. You're recording it from one position, and we tell them not to move the camera. So there's no cuts involved. It's just to start and stop and edit.
Truth away from home. Other one connection feels so strange. People changing with every phase. Holding tight through space and time. Across dimensions, hearts align.
I'm MetaRick!
What? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the MetaRick podcast, where we explore the stories of founders and builders, people who leverage spatial computing and artificial intelligence to build their companies and to manage business programs. Today, we're going to dive into the story of a company called RiVR. We have Alex Harvey, the creative director and co-founder, who comes from a long background in video making, producing games trailers for Codemasters and running his own video company from back in 2014. And then we also have Leon Fernandez, immersive content creator and technologist, who also comes from a long background in videography and video editing. This is kind of a common trend we found as we interview more and more people in the XR world. It seems like a natural evolution to go from filmmaking and storytelling and video and photography to 3D immersive storytelling with spatial computing. So the story at a high level, Alex founded RiVR back in 2017. Ty joined him a few years after that. And in just 7 years, they've gone from this regional studio in the UK to working internationally, creating photorealistic, immersive training environments for the Ministry of Defense, emergency services, and all sorts of companies around the world. I first encountered them when I was working at Engage. We actually used some of your content in some of our demos to highlight what it's like to bring a photorealistic scan of a city or of an object into a 3D space where you could get multiple people around it interacting with it. And then had the fortunate chance to meet you guys at AWE a couple years ago. And I'm so excited to finally get to dive deep into your story and actually get to feature you on the show here today. So to get started, Alex, maybe we'll kick it over to you to share a little bit about your background before RiVR and the founding story. Like, how'd this all get started?
Yeah, thanks. Good to speak again. And you talking about travel makes me and Ty feel very itchy feet. I think we're definitely due a trip to America soon. So hopefully we can go back to AWE. But 2014, I was working at Codemasters, did 10 years there making racing game trailers. So I was the video editor, basically just used to crash all the cars together and then create trailers that would make people buy the games. But it just, when you mentioned drones a minute ago, it made me think back to that job, because before we started, it was in-game flying around as a drone. So I think a lot of that skill for real-world flying of drones for capture of photogrammetry came from back in game engine. So now we're back to game engine flying around in a headset around photogrammetry. And today I was out with this doing some FPV flying, which is also, it's just like an amazing thing. But anyway, back to 2014, we started, after we made a lot of racing game trailers at Codemasters, I then went into real world racing games. So we started doing like the touring cars and Formula One cars and chasing them with drones and stuff. That's how we started making video trailers in the real world. And then Ty started joining us when we started working on house videos. So we used to do the finding country homes, create a home trailer to help sell the house. We ended up doing 50 houses a month. Tyrone got quite tired of doing those edits. They got quite tedious. So we managed to sell that company. And then we started on the 360 video path. And that seems to be where the whole of the VR bit started for us back in the Gear VR days, when we were putting the 6 GoPros into a rig to make a 360 video. And we ended up filming stuff for Thompson Holidays and flying all over the world, filming their cruise ships and airplanes. But we came back with these 360 videos that were really good to show people what it was like, but there was no way to share that video with 4 headsets or 10 headsets. So we went straight into making a piece of software, because it was massively needed to sync these headsets together. Because back in the day, it was clipping a Samsung phone into a Gear VR headset. We probably got one up here somewhere. And it was a pain to try and sync them all together when everyone was pressing the side of the head. So we ended up making some software called RiVR, and it allows everyone in that holiday shop to sync the video together, press start together, and they can simultaneously watch the same video, but they all have the ability to look around wherever they want. So it's independent viewing. And then the travel advisor can help draw on the screen and highlight things in the video. But I talk about that because that leads into what we then created that did really well for holidays, but we merged it straight into training because we saw that the blue light services saw that same linking software was really beneficial for their training. But yeah, that's where I got to. And then we're up to, I don't know, about 2020 about then. And then we started looking at photogrammetry stuff. But let me know if you want me to carry on with the photogrammetry story or you want me to do a different angle.
Well, I'd like to take a quick pause because I think there's already some interesting things to start unpacking there. So what I think is interesting is in the past, a lot of the folks I've talked to that come from a film background to an immersive background, it's really a lot of like short film making and like creative storytelling. And even in trailers and home tours, there's still creative storytelling in that. But I think that you have this more pragmatic experience with video where you kind of understand a business side of it, of like, we're trying to tell a story that engages with a certain audience to drive either a conversion or inspire them to associate with the brand in a certain way. And then same thing with the home walkthroughs. That next step into 360, it sounds like it started as an individual experience before going to multi-user and trying to create social. What was that pivot point like for you? Like, was it something where users were telling you that we need to have more people in this room together? Or how did you kind of come to that conclusion that we need to move to multi-user?
It was just the fact that when we showed one person in the office, we thought we had a really good thing where you could be on a cruise ship and you could look around the whole venue. But then when you're describing it, everyone else in the room is not having that experience. So it felt like it needed to be a shared experience. And the sales at the time, I was working with some stuff with Thompson Holidays, and that was the first sort of client to see the potential. But then it moved into home and house videos 360, and then it was blue light services, and every single person since then will find the use case in their industry. It seems like it's generic. It goes across the board. Everyone finds value in it. But it is important to start on the 360 stuff because that's where it all came from. When we talk about photogrammetry later on and crime scene investigation, it was all from that fascination of knowing that you can invoke a better emotion when someone watches your content in a 360 video than you can on a 2D screen. That was my turning point when I was watching really basic, I say basic, but back in the day it was Chris Milk's 360 videos that I was watching, and I was fascinated with this 360 format. But at the time we didn't really have the ability to do stereo, and so, you know, that's moved on a lot. But God, I can go into everything to do with stereo and 360 and how Oculus Go was seemed like they forgot about video when they killed the Go.
Yeah, 360 video, I think, has become this like really underrated aspect of immersive technologies now because, you know, the scanning's getting a lot better, and we'll talk about the photogrammetry stuff in just a second here. But I think there is something about 360 video that we need to remember for people not in the XR echo chamber, where this might be their first time putting a headset on ever and consuming spatial content. It's pretty mind-blowing for a lot of people just to feel like they can look around inside of a video versus looking into a window of a video. And it's inspired a lot of the great founders in the space. Their first experience a lot of the time was something very simple, like a Google Cardboard tour of a helicopter around New York or something like that, right? With the experiences, it sounds like real estate was like a big focal point, which makes sense because like Matterporting and virtual tours, and like that seems like an industry that has a lot of this. At what point did you start expanding out of the home and kind of property tours into these other use cases around like CSI or emerging like emergency services, firefighters, police stations and whatnot?
I was just going to touch on then just quickly on the 360 footage, underrated. I always go back to when Ty was doing 360 stuff. Remember lots of years ago, I don't even know, 3 or 4, 5 years ago, you were taking the Insta camera away but not really using it for 360. You were doing the reframes from it.
Yeah.
I think it's underrated massively as a reframe like device. My girlfriend's out today at Legoland Windsor. She's got a 360 camera Insta X4, just capturing the day, knowing that it's going to be a 2D edit. I think it's underrated. People don't even know that you can do that sort of workflow. Get some great videos from that.
That's it. I'd think that a lot of the 360 camera manufacturers push that as the primary use of it when they do advertise it. And then in turn, because we're more aware of its capability to be used inside a headset, look 360 degrees, we have a double use for it. Most people are going to use it for one or the other. And they, and I think the ability to be able to capture something and be able to sort of, never miss a moment is a great selling point. There's just so many people that they look at an alien looking camera with 2 lenses or more and they go, what the hell is this thing? So,
but then just going to the pivot, you mentioned, when do we go into other stuff from the 360 camera and filming that stuff, house tours. And we sort of shifted the house tour company as we started doing the immersive stuff, but running in parallel was everyone in the office was tinkering with the Vive when it first came out. So we were in the office, putting the Vive on, having a look on the lab and having a look through some experiences. I don't know if you remember realities.io on Steam. There was a download that they did. I think it's the same company that's behind Puzzling Places. They made a photogrammetry couple of scenes where you were inside a derelict classroom and you were in like a morgue and you could go underneath the table. And it was a photogrammetry scene, but there was tiny holes in the floor. But I was walking around this scene, and for me, that was like then being inside the video. It's almost like I was inside what my passion was video. Now I was inside the scene. But what was missing was movement, because all I could do was I could pick up a piece of paper from underneath the table and I could turn it over and it was like a flyer. And so when we saw that, we started looking at photogrammetry, and the team was saying, no, we're doing 360. Let's just stick to that. The headsets can't handle, VR can't handle photogrammetry, especially with movement in it. And I remember saying to everyone that I want to see the computer burning before you say you can't do it. Let's see it on fire, and then we know where the limit is. And back in the day, it was like a 1080. It was just a graphics card, like a 1080 with a Vive. And we managed to do it. We put a crime scene into the photogrammetry scene, and we walked around and we scanned a fake dead body and put it in the scene. And that was our demo. And we just went around all the police stations, fire stations, and all the shows in the world showing this like demo, a photogrammetry crime scene. And off the back of that, we ended up making 10 fire investigation scenarios. And now we moved into crime scene investigation. But we did crime because we were doing 2 scenes a year for the government, which were photogrammetry counter-terrorism training scenes. But we couldn't sell them on as a product. So we used all the sort of skills that we made up over the last sort of 5 years to make our own product that's now called RiVR CSO. But that's jumping forward quite a bit.
Yeah, real quick. Most of the audience for this is like relatively XR savvy, but just in case there's anyone coming into it that doesn't know the technical terms, maybe there's some of the folks that are more marketers or like HR leaders, like future of work people that are curious about expanding their awareness of this stuff. Maybe you could give us the high level definition of photogrammetry, how that differs from something like a 360 video.
Yeah, I guess how I always explain photogrammetry is that it's the process of taking thousands of photos, could be tens of thousands of photos, of an object, person, or a place, and stitching those photos together in software and making a 3D model. That normally comes out quite big, and we normally have to simplify it, decimate it, make it smaller to be able to fit into VR, depending on how big it is. And then there's loads of other things you can do with level of detail. But yeah, it's now as easy as doing it on your phone. Photogrammetry on the phone there's plenty of apps out there to try that out. We're also making our own to make that pipeline easier. But yeah, that's what photogrammetry is. And you can do it from drones and big cameras or phones. And now more from video. Tyrone's been tinkering with more than me.
Yeah, this is essentially for those who don't know the behind the scenes of it, like when you scan something and like when you see those viral videos of someone like scanning an object and suddenly it's a 3D model that looks like that object. this is that process, is taking all of these photos and then using that data, that visual context, to essentially wrap around a 3D mesh and make it look more photorealistic, right? Like that's kind of the end result we're going for.
Yeah, the end result is the opposite of the end result, I guess, would be a handmade object in like Blender or some sort of software. But there is, certain times when making a spherical glass object is probably easier to do in Blender than it is to scan a glass real world object, because some of the materials are reflective and it doesn't really work very well for photogrammetry. So there's sometimes a balancing act of what you use.
And so, and maybe we're getting too into the technical weeds, but I do think it's interesting to segment out like the different ways of getting a place, an object, or a person like into 3D. So there's 360 video capture, which is essentially a passive pre-recorded experience like video that just wraps around the space that you get to kind of sit in and look around, but there's no interaction. It's pre-recorded, right?
Yeah.
There's photogrammetry, which is like all of these photos to then bring that asset into the 3D space, where now it's actually a 3D file, but just has this hyper photorealistic kind of scan around it through the photos taken. And then what's Gaussian splatting or some of these AI generated versions of this that people talk about? How would that differ from photogrammetry?
I suppose that kind of lends to me really. Like I was the sort of starting point for RiVR of kind of having a look into what at the time at the start was like NERF, neural radiance fields. It was kind of like the new thing a good few years ago now, with this kind of idea that you could create scans using video, but it wouldn't be in the same way as photogrammetry. More closer to something like point cloud data. If you've ever used a LiDAR scanner, it's something a little bit more that side of things. The only thing is that like as it evolved into more Gaussian splatting, you got more detail. It looked very realistic, but you weren't getting the mesh, the skeleton, the bones that you would get from a photogrammetry scan. So realistically, it was a challenge to kind of create something solid. So if you did, it was like throwing, I can explain it like a polygon soup at the scene and hoping what would stick. And unfortunately, sometimes what you get out of it wouldn't look anywhere near as good as the actual Gaussian splat itself. But as things are moving on, and with AI, I'm absolutely certain that will just continue to improve. You've seen things like more recently, MetaConnect showed off Hyperscape, and that shows that there is some capabilities, but there's still work to be done. And who knows, maybe there's a merger of photogrammetry and Gaussian splatting.
Yeah, we're totally open for things as they evolve. We're always there thinking which is the best to use. I remember when you first showed me the NERF stuff, we were outside a hotel somewhere, probably a couple of years ago, and you just scanned your frosty car in the car park, sent it to the office as a NERF, and then they put it inside VR. I think the result wasn't very good at the time, but then things get better. And the Hyperscapes thing wasn't that good for me. I put on the Quest 3 and my internet connection couldn't run Hyperscape, so I haven't even seen it yet. So I don't know why they need to have a big connection to be able to view that meta.
It's interesting. I think the AI side of things is still in this kind of weird middle state where like the demos and the POCs are good enough to get us really excited, and the future state of it is very interesting because like where I go with it is like if it gets good enough, it could create real-time representation, right? So instead of having to scan something and have a pipeline where you then upload it into the space, like if I could have something like a updated version of Orion or even just a full headset, if the cameras outside my headset could scan the environment around me and then generate an environment in real time and other people could join me, that's where we get like the illusion of teleportation. That becomes very exciting. Is that something we're going to be able to do this year, next year, 3 years, 5 years? That's really hard to say, right? It's more like a path that we might get to versus the stuff that you guys are working on today is very tangible, right? Like you are already managing a pipeline of taking content, bringing it into a space, giving people access to do real training with it. So maybe you could talk me through a little bit of that process of the pipeline of getting the content, bringing it into an environment, and then like giving someone access to a use case. Like what does that pipeline look like at the moment?
I guess it depends. We always define it with 3DOF and 6DOF, whether you're talking to me now about video content or six-off, CGI, photogrammetry content, because we, up until now, probably 80% of our clients have been video clients and 20% have been, using models. And so at the moment, our biggest thing is teaching clients how to shoot 360 video and 3D video. And then they upload and edit those MP4s onto their link kits, and then they distribute that for their training. That's the majority of our clients. But if we forward to where we are now with the Fire Service College, who's just down the road from us, they're using RiVR Link for video, but they're using RiVR CSI and RiVR Arc for their interactive stuff for the fire investigations. So they use a Quest and they do both on it. And so we've got a lot of historical clients that will eventually do sixed off. But at the moment, the process for that looks like we teach them and we do it ourselves. We scan about 70 objects for each of our burn containers, and we upload them into our system, which is on the Quest store and Pico stores. You can download the build, and then you'd log on as you, and you'd get given all of your assets that are assigned to you. And then in that world, you can either watch 360 videos or 3D videos, or you can go into pre-made scenarios to do fire investigation or crime scene investigation, or you can create your own environments. And the fact that we've made it for the blue light services first, stage one, means it's great for people like Tesla, who now use the same environment, but without all the police and fire, and they just have a showroom that shows off their Cybertruck inside VR. At conferences and shows and demos, they also did QR codes with us of all their like massive items, like their mega pack that they can't take around everywhere. We stick it in a VR showroom with the Cybertruck. Now they can look at all their products and things inside our system. So that's the pipeline at the moment. They just give us OBJs or FBXs of their stuff. We upload it to them and they can place it and create their own environment.
Incredible. So you guys, a piece of your offering is this educational almost consultation where you're helping coach them on how to generate the assets and create them. Are you still hands-on kind of creating your own 360 video for them a lot of the time, or would you say it's mostly a coaching effort and kind of enabling them with best practices?
We're doing our own content separate to their content. A lot of the team go out often to train the people on how to do shooting. But the irony is that 360 video, especially, is easier to shoot than two-dimensional content because you're just putting the camera down and pressing go. You're recording it from one position and we tell them not to move the camera. So there's no cuts involved. It's just start and stop and edit. And for a lot of people, that saves time, money, and it's a lot safer to put that camera into dangerous, hazardous places. Recently, we get calls to come and do that with people because I would like to go, and Tyrone, we like to go to different events to film stuff. So we go out to recently a plane crash. It wasn't a real plane crash, but JCB had hired a quarry and they crashed a plane into it and they had loads of casualties, loads of first responders there. And we just ran around with a 360 camera, filming an extra piece of content that can go out to all of our Blue Light Services clients, because we sit all the content in a library. It's called Link Library. And that if you have a link kit and you part of the ecosystem, you can download assets from the store. And a lot of people share their content. So that's building nicely.
Also, another thing to kind of add to that really quickly is the fact that we sort of tier the kind of content that we're doing in terms of video content. So we also do 3D 180 type content. So we're using more stereo lenses, we're using Canon hardware, and we do tend to do a lot of that as a high level production that we as RiVR, as a not only as a dev studio, but also as a media production studio, can offer that as a service. So we have the clients that are saying, look, we want something really clean, really polished, and something that is as real as possible for a passive piece of media. We've got this budget, we'll pay you to do it. So it's quite fun to be able to do immersive content for these different clients of ours. But we train different clients as well how to shoot their own 360 video. Like Alex said, it can be quite easy if you kind of get given the knowledge. We give them that knowledge and they go out and make their own stuff. You talked about MOD, military defense type stuff. They don't want us to see what they're shooting using their link kits. So the real kind of value to them is that they can go and do it themselves. They can get it in our link system and put it on multiple heads at the same time and go through training exercises or review training exercises.
This is amazing. Like, I think the content creation process, I like your guys' approach to this, where like you do some of it on your own and you offer a service, but in reality, this is something that I think brands need to develop a muscle internally so that they can, like a 3D asset's going to be as ubiquitous as a JPEG is, right? Like at some point that will be true. And to rely on external vendors to create all of your 3D assets and all of your 360 content for environments and models, it won't be cost effective. It won't be efficient. You'll still bring in outside vendors for some things, but I think most of that needs to be done in-house. And then once you have those 3D assets and those environments and those videos and all that content, bringing in outside vendors that either have software or services that help you get more out of that content and do more things with it. I think that's the future state that we're looking at as these companies start to mature, but they still need a lot of help getting there. So the fact that you guys help have that kind of coaching muscle to get them there is really valuable. Kind of moving into your go-to-market strategy a little bit. So with these companies that you work with today, how are you getting most of these customers? Are they coming to you, or are you doing an outbound process to find them? Like, how does a conversation typically start with a new client?
I guess for the whole time we've been doing shows, we've been at a lot of trade shows, but it isn't anything where we chuck loads of money at marketing. There's me and Ty, we do the shows, we do a lot of videos, and because of the video background, I think that's played into why we probably make a lot of content on LinkedIn. We do a lot of LinkedIn stuff. I'm live on a few platforms as we're speaking. We're always out flying drones and showing people VR. And then I just put on the bottom of my posts, send us a message, and then we have a sales team that go and speak to those people. So there isn't, and then it's a lot of like over the fence buying, I call it, where a lot of the fire service and police forces like to see who's using VR, and they look and see what kit you're using, and then they might give us a ring. And I always say we don't normally sell it unless we go and do a demo. So we're there doing the demo. That's normally where we can.
Yeah, I think one of the key things I think that we know as a small company in some ways is that it's challenging to start putting out, traditional full marketing to people who probably don't even need VR yet, but they will see it eventually get broader and broader. I think the way that Alex does it particularly is that it's just much easier to go and get headsets on heads and let them do the talking. So whether that's they do their own sort of word of mouth and they pass it around, or we interview them maybe afterwards. So when we're in an expo, it's a real big thing that we'll always do a couple of videos at an expo, wherever it is in the world. We'll, ask people what their thoughts are about the content that they're seeing and just push that out there and see how that gains traction. And obviously using the fact that we're a production company, it means that we have the tools to do it, and pretty quickly as well. I think you're a big advocate of making sure that when we capture this type of content, it's out. It gets straight out into like people's eye line straight away, because it's old news. Leave it a week and it's old news. The show's gone. And
yeah, you want to be hitting, like the emergency services show, you want to be hitting all the people in that hashtag in that area that evening and the day after while they're still in the area, checking their socials. It's like you can just see it getting busier around those events. We do it when we're in America as well. It's basics, I guess. It's just that we've been doing it because we've been on all the platforms for so many years, I guess. And some people just join now and then they start and try and do Instagram, and it takes a while to build up.
I think the funny thing is actually off the back of being so rapid with some of the content that we make, then we end up doing content for other people who are like our clients or become our clients off the back of it. It's like we have done content for the Tesla fire and safety department when they're at a show, if like it's FDIC in Indianapolis, because we're friendly with them, and we've made amazing 360 content or 180 content, and we'll just make some 2D content, and they can use that to promote themselves. And it's that's how we kind of run RiVR in that sense. We want to kind of be friendly with our clients, not just their clients, and we're us, and we just stay separate.
I love that mindset of treating clients more like partners. Like at the end of the day, like we're helping run these programs. It should feel like we're on the same team. And that's an underrated thing, is this idea of helping them create content. Even if you're not getting a public facing case study that you have PR approval to put on your website, like this is something we do at Arthur pretty heavily, is like, even if we don't have those approvals, we'll still proactively work on making videos and one pagers, and like as if it was going to be something we'd market out to the world, and we'll just hand that to our client for them to market internally, and we'll help them spread the word, because even though we can't share it publicly and loudly, we can help you champion this within your company and share it to other stakeholders in your business. And why would we want you to not be equipped with those powerful pieces of content and these tools and just rely on word of mouth when we can help you tell that story better? So I love that you guys do that too, that you really put this emphasis on content creation. And so sticking on the top of the funnel with this organic approach, like organic social and creation of content, there's something that I think is really important when it comes to these new technologies, which is using it ourselves. Like you can become a trusted leader by actually just going out and participating all the time, even if it's not your core tool set. And I think your team does a very good job of this. Like Ty, for example, I see the Apple Vision Pro on the desk in front of you. You create that YouTube channel right away when Apple Vision Pro came out, where you just committed to going, I'm going to experiment with this headset and I'm going to create content to document what I learn as I create it and put it out to the world. So maybe with that piece, because again, you say you guys don't invest a lot in marketing, but I think that those content strategies make for very good marketing organically. Talk me through what made you start the YouTube channel and maybe a little bit about the strategy for how you go about making those videos.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's one of those things that sits parallel to like my daily job and the stuff that I do with RiVR, but it's one of those things that has been a real passion because of working for RiVR. Like dealing with anything XR has kind of grown my knowledge over the years I've worked for the company. And I think that the moment that we knew that Vision Pro was coming last year, we were out in Cupertino when they announced it. It was one of those things where we were, excited. We knew it was coming. And I think realistically, it was just down to the sort of the specs of it. And when they kind of read that out, I was kind of sold, because I want to see a lot of the media that I've captured, and a lot of it has been in 8K. I've wanted to see that as close to its sort of true resolution as possible. So from that standpoint, there was a real driver to get it. I think I was kind of a bit sort of on the fence of how much it cost at the time. I think I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to get this, but in the end, there was definitely a drive to get hold of it. And obviously with the stuff that we do at RiVR all the time with immersive capture and with the scanning of models and stuff, this headset can really display AR models incredibly well. And then, it just made sense to do a YouTube channel on all of this stuff that seemed to just be kind of coming out of, nearly a year on from, and it was, I think I picked it up maybe a month before it launched in the UK and the US. I was out in New York, and I was like, I'm going to get it when I go there. I can't wait any longer. We hadn't got a release date in the UK, and I'm just going to get it.
You should probably touch on that. You didn't just wait till it came out in the UK. You bought it in America when it wasn't out in the UK.
Yeah.
You got it from over there. But that's also, it's not a RiVR thing. That's just a Thai passionate thing. So lucky for me, he is just really passionate about tech. And I think that works really well when you talk about it coming across to people. It's literally a passion thing.
But it just allowed me to then start sort of rolling on, like you say, what if we talk about this particular headset, but kind of what it can do, what it can't do, what other headsets are similar. I make a point when the YouTube videos start that I say about Apple Vision Pro, but I say about spatial computing, and it's really important that I don't just localize that on just Vision Pro for all of it, because it needs to show, where things will go. Vision as maybe a product line will evolve, but then there's also going to be all the competitors that evolve with it. So it's really important to do that. But it's allowed me to also kind of highlight some of the stuff I do with RiVR. I think one of the videos I did was just talking about how we do immersive media and how, Apple are doing their Apple immersive video. And it's like, it's not new news to us, but to anyone that's being demoed Apple Immersive Media in stores, it's like mind blowing, So, it's amazing to see it go more into the public's vision.
There's so many different formats, and we started talking about 360 video, but if you went all the way forward to like now shooting whatever they call it, spatial, on these two cameras on the front of an iPhone, there's so many different, and you can have it in a box, and you can have it outside the box with a little bit blurry, and you can have 3D 180. But then I saw some stuff the other day, some 360 3D, still really good. Maybe the quality of it was a little bit less, but there's a minefield now of video formats. I don't know how they're going to try and get around all these different formats.
So this is interesting. Let's sit on the Apple Vision Pro and the immersive video thing for a second, and then I want to circle back into the go-to-market stuff, because I think there's a little bit more further down the funnel we can talk about. But I think this idea of immersive content consumption is very interesting. I think gaming takes most of the conversation because most of the early adopters tend to be gamers, more tech-savvy people that want to do more with the tech, so they lean in and they take the extra steps to learn the controllers and the interactivity. And so gaming makes sense to me as kind of the first major adoption use case for consumers. And then for businesses, obviously, there's very specific ROI-focused use cases on training and some of the offerings that you guys do yourselves, collaboration, soft skills development, all sorts of things, product 3D design and prototyping. But for the immersive video side, I think it's a really interesting use case, because for people like my mom who don't want to take the time to learn controllers and they're not an early adopter, I actually introduced VR to her by showing her like a Pixar style short film called Asteroids from like 2016, where it's a very passive experience where you're just standing inside of a cartoon and that cartoon plays through a story over the course of 6 minutes and you get to observe it from within it. And that seems to be an easier thing to get across to these people that have never really done VR before. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of lashback to this. Like my buddy Nate just started a newsletter, and one of the taglines is he's talking about the Apple Immersive Submerged experience. And he's like, 3D movies have had a rough go of it. It's a headache-inducing blue and red glasses from back in the day. The 3D TV boom in the 2000s that really, or the 2010s that had a rough time. And immersive video just hasn't had a successful go that's really drawn in a lot of people, whether that be in a theater or in a headset. So I'm curious what your take is with things like this new submerged video on Apple Vision Pro and the things happening with Meta and the partnership with Prime. Like, do you think immersive video still has a shot? And what do you think makes it different now than what it might have been 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think immersive is definitely going to be a thing. And there's going to be different menu items to choose from. I don't think we're going to get to a 2-hour movie like Submerged very quickly. I think it's much more like, I see it as a 2D film in the cinema, and then an experience that might be an immersive video experience that might be 10 minutes, 15 minutes that sits alongside it as a download. And then the next stage of that I've always been shouting at Netflix and shouting at Hollywood for like literally 4 years. Why are we not making immersive photogrammetry experiences based on film and TV? Because we can do it now. I don't want to, this is my little shout at them, I don't want to play hack and slash with Game of Thrones zombies. I want to be at the Red Wedding. I want to be in the film. I want to be in the scene. I want to interact and move things in an environment. I want to be on the wall with Jon Snow, looking over, talking to him and looking over the wall, and then the experience ends. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a guided experience in a small area, but these things are not being done. So that's the way I think it's going to go first. Submerged is great. They're pushing the limits with the amount of camera movements that we see in there. And we talk about it all the time, but there are so many shots they can just about get away with. There's one, if we're going to talk really detailed about it, just before it all starts kicking off in the submarine, and there's a bit of a security camera angle looking at the two male actors around a table. And that angle, that tilting the camera forward and letting you experience that is horrible. And they need to make the camera flat and just let you look from the ceiling. It will be just the same, and you won't feel this weird feeling. The shot lasted for just too long, 5 seconds, 10 seconds too long to make you feel it too much. And then the other ones where they were pulling back really fast, they were actually, for me, they were okay. It felt okay to pull back really fast. There must have been some sort of dolly that was completely still or stable. But I thought I was going to feel a bit rough with them, but it wasn't. But yeah, I want the experiences to return to handing me something. I want to be passed from an immersive video inside VR. I want Jon Snow or someone to pass me their weapon, pass me their sword, and I'll pick it up and now it's in my environment. Like the dinosaur pokes his head out of the screen inside Apple's videos, you should be able to have characters and IP that people are that people like, that has, Submerged was not really a tie-on, I don't think, to anything 2D.
No.
They I don't know why.
I want to triple click on that because I think that's the most important takeaway I got. Like, I agree with that entire spiel, by the way. I'm so excited that we have that as a soundbite now because I could not have said it any more eloquently than you did. But
Good.
IP that people already resonate with, like the Game of Thrones one really hit me because this morning I saw an update that they're just greenlit making a Game of Thrones movie, and that makes me so incredibly sad because I'm like, you already have this great show that is so epic, and then you have a great follow-on that's done well too with House of Dragon. Why are we butchering this by making a movie that I'm expecting to not be good? Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe this will be on the internet as something where I just threw the hottest take in the world. But I do think this would be a better reuse of that IP, is like these micro interactions where you take key moments from the story and let people walk into them and experience them. And even if the interaction is just for like 4 seconds at the very end where you're going through it and then you get to grab something right before it's over, or you have to do the action of like blowing a horn or something as the scene ends, like that would be enough, I think, to get people to lean in and go, whoa, that's interesting. I want to try the other 3 of those, or the other version of that. Or maybe I wish I could have done more interaction, so I'm going to go do a different experience now. So I think the IP is such a core piece of making that good.
So something I want to just quickly say and just add in is that Alex is very visual and will look at every shot in a visual way. I'm visual, but I'm definitely a technical side of that too. So I look at what are the technical limitations of the hardware that you are using. What can it not do that your human vision can do? And I think that these are some of the things that when Alex is talking about that particular shot in Submerged and some of the motion, what we haven't got to, which is broadly available on all the headsets that we have on the table apart from Vision Pro, is the ability for that media to be shot and play back at high frame rates, which will then allow a bit more comfort when you're seeing faster motion. I think there's within Apple's own trailer, like immersive experience trailer, there are soccer balls flying around the pitch, and you're seeing people throwing American footballs from one end of the field to the other, and it's smooth, and they're the things that help with that feeling of any kind of motion sickness or uncomfortable feeling. The only problem is that you still can't get away from, with stereo video, a sweet spot. And that's where I've been racking my brains for a while since watching Submerged about a couple of particular shots, but one that Alex is talking about was almost like pointing down. And why did they choose that? Was it because the team that shot it were maybe experienced fixed perspective 2D media creators, videographers, filmmakers, and so they're trying desperately to get in some of these arty framed shots that you can do when you're framing with a normal lens, but you maybe not be able to do with 3D 180 content. But then I realized that maybe it's because the sweet spot is very centralized in the frame. And so if your characters aren't centralized in the frame, you've got to either bring the camera down, and they didn't want that shot. They just chose to sacrifice having less 3D if it was level, as opposed to the camera tilted downwards towards them, and going with that tilted effect. The downside is when you look left and right, the world is tipped. The horizon is off, and that's why you feel a bit funny.
That's, for me, that's the cardinal sin, though. We see it with Canon, when Canon bought the lens out, we went to the show. Was it Vegas?
Yep.
We went to Vegas and we were showing our link kits with their amazing content that we shot on their amazing camera. And they literally, not going to name any names, but they literally had Quest under the table and they were showing secret footage to people, like high-end people, that was shot on their 3D lens that was filmed running along with no gimbal. One of the shots was on the floor looking up. They were putting it on people's heads. They put it on my head, and I nearly had an argument with this Canon man because I said, you don't even know what your lens, you've made an amazing lens and you're ruining a medium by showing people footage that's looking up. And I think that they are just stuck in their old ways of, oh, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It literally isn't okay. You can have to have the edges completely flat. The only way you can get away with it and shoot completely down is like we saw, if they turbo vignette everything and have you focused on something in the center, or you do the zoom in on the faces.
I think that they've used two different types of shot selection in submersion. I don't want to get too deep into submersion, but just to touch on it, that the ability to do these RT depth of field shots have been done in a different way to using the dual fisheye lens system, whether it's the Blackmagic one or Apple's own one. So from that standpoint, they've been able to get some very good shots where they can kind of frame it, but they're larger than life. So if you've seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, but some of these shots that have been done in that slightly different way look larger than life, but do give you the ability to maybe move the camera in a way you couldn't with the dual system. So there are rules that shouldn't be broken, but people do break them. And that's basically kind of whether you want to do, as Alex says, a cardinal sin and make yourself a piece of content that could make certain people feel a bit unsteady, or whether you just stick to the rules, you know what the rules are, and you know that you've got probably a safe opportunity to show an amazing piece of content.
I think it's
this is the most
risky.
This is the most exciting and challenging aspect of any immersive content, right? Like regardless of whether it's an immersive film or an immersive training experience or whatever. Like this has come up on the pod a couple of times now, that the transition from radio to television was like taken for granted now, right? We're so used to these highly cinematic, bingeable TV shows that have just incredible storytelling, even if their script's okay and the acting's okay. Like people have gotten so good at the formula of filmmaking now that we can have hours and hours and hours of high production, high quality content. And when that first started, I mean, the transition from radio to television was, we didn't know what we were doing. We just took plays and basically put one camera in front of a theater actor on a staged set doing theater in front of a camera. And when we started adding commercials, it was just a pan over to a guy at a table doing an infomercial, like a booth at an event. And it wasn't until much later we started realizing like, oh, wait, you could have multiple cameras and cut back from one to the other and start doing cinematic storytelling for a TV show. And it wasn't until The Sopranos that we realized you could actually write a story that was the equivalent of a 20-hour movie, right? And be able to open up the doors like Game of Thrones and these other shows. And so it's an evolution of a medium, and that required decades of experimentation and ideas and mistakes. Like I love watching the documentary about, it's a Netflix show, I think, about movies that almost didn't get made.
Yes.
And there's one about Home Alone where the budget was so low and they had to film these days really quickly. And back then the stuntmen were literally falling on pavement and cement. They were cautious. They wanted to limit the takes because they didn't want to kill these people. Like these people are really doing these crazy falls and stunts and dropping irons on heads and all this gnarly stuff. And so they invented a second camera. That's this cheap, crappy camera that they don't really care if it's a good shot or if it breaks, but we're going to get some extra angles so that we can backfill if we didn't get the main shot in the main take. We have a second chance at it. Mm-hmm. And that caused them to do shots no one had done before. Things like, let's just drop the camera down the chute and we'll get a POV of the iron falling down and it'll hit the guy in the head and we'll just drop the camera because it's this cheap, crappy camera. We don't care about it. And so hearing those stories inspires the next generation of filmmakers to then go, wait, now I can do that on purpose instead of on accident because I saw it work before. And I think in VR, we're still fairly new on developing those common practices. So from an immersive storytelling perspective, it's interesting to hear you talk about the shots that stood out to you of like, well, when you shoot like that in VR, it can cause nausea. Or if you shift the focal point in this way, it can actually make you able to do a different type of shot. And where are you going to sacrifice versus where are you going to just follow the standard? That's like a new process that we're going to have to go through with VR as a new content medium. And I think the same is true when designing training. So going back into the business perspective, when we look at SaaS tools, there's a very standard template of talking head videos and decks with bullet points, and the training goes step 1, step 2, and the settings in your profile to log in and out is in this button in one of these 2 or 3 places on every SaaS tool. But in VR, we're coming up with new design principles. Where do you put that menu button? Is your menu a 2D window that's just a SaaS tool, or is your menu 3D objects and something more interesting? We're still kind of figuring that out right now. And so I wonder kind of where that's going to go. But for now, I kind of want to shift focus back into the go-to-market side for a few minutes, because I know we only have so much time.
Yeah.
We talked about top of funnel. We talked about this production of content, this authentic exploration where you guys obviously experiment a lot and develop opinions so that you can come to the table with ideas. Once you engage a customer, once they see that content or they peek over the fence and see what their friends in the space are doing and they want to work with you guys, where does the sales cycle go from there? Like, what's the first conversation until like kickoff of project? Could you walk me through that buyer's journey?
Yeah, I guess we can touch on one that was really recent, which is Warwick Castle, because they've
White Castle, like Harold and Kumar White Castle.
I don't know.
An actual medieval castle. Well, it's very local to us, but they obviously have a set amount of challenges because the building is very old. They can't do any modifications to it. It's a heritage site, and with that, they have challenges. And I think one of the biggest challenges they have being inclusive, especially to people with, mobility issues, disabilities, things like that. So, we've been in contact with them for a while. They were trying to work out how they could make it more inclusive. And we said, why not create a piece of content and give people an opportunity to view that if they can't go up a medieval tower? They can't go to the higher levels of some of these buildings that will never have an elevator built into them. So that's the toing and froing kind of settled upon creating some media and then utilizing RiVR as a multi-user ability to show all of this experiences. So no longer, even though it's a business and they want to make money from tourism and bringing people in, they also are sort of thinking about the entertainment side of it for people who can't necessarily go to these places. They just can't get up there. And so, yeah, Alex will probably kind of elaborate more on it.
Well, I just want to go, I wanted to go back a little bit because you mentioned the journey of getting that client. And I feel like after we did sort of police and fire, and we're still doing them, but we found passions that we wanted to follow. And what I mean is that my brother's massively into the history side of things. And so we go around and scanning a lot of historical sites. My fun is to walk around these places and to see how they could enhance it. How can I have a better experience? I've got 3 kids. My girlfriend's got 2 kids. Ty's got 2 kids. Like our kids, I want to show kids how it's easier and more fun to learn in an immersive way now than it was when I was 10. And so we sort of try and find those clients by just thinking how it can be better for our kids. And we've got 3 installations in Warwick now where we did 3D prints of the local area. And then there's iPads in the museum. So you can pick the iPad up and it hovers over the 3D model and it turns into an animated Fire of Warwick to see where the path spread through the town over the 3D model. We saw it in Apple Park. What I'm saying is it's more driven by things we want to go and do. Like I think there should be an accessibility video for Warwick Castle where not able-bodied people can go up the tower and down the dungeon because you can't do it in real life if you're in a wheelchair. And so we went and filmed it, but we did it as a proof of concept first. We say, here's what we think is good. Do you want to be part of it? Have you got any budget? And they said yes. And now they've taken it to the whole of their group. Merlin Entertainment in the UK are now showing it off as their accessibility video. And next week it goes for its first 2-week trial in the Great Hall. So in the medieval banquet hall, we're going to have a RiVR box full of headsets. see how we lead straight onto that box, because we could probably touch on that as well. We make that hardware, that box. They're going to put a 12 kit in there, and they're going to put people through it, and we'll use RiVR to press play and sync the headsets up, and everyone will see the same thing at the same time. But Ty shot that in 3D 180, and it's about a 6-minute video.
Just to add a bit of context, Warwick is our hometown. So Alex is invested in our hometown. I'm invested in our hometown. As a starting point for these proof of concepts, it's really easy because it's on our doorstep that we've got such amazing kind of historical sites to sort of like start those conversations with people. And then, as Alex said right at the beginning of the podcast, like the over-the-fence buying or the over-the-fence kind of like looking has now happened with this group that run the castle, and they run a lot of amusement places, like Six Flags of a
Legoland.
And so in there, they're thinking, well, we could use that for our thing, but what does it look like? And that's where we, again, like partners, we will speak to the clients, we'll ask them, brainstorm with them, what do you think? And what option would be best for them, whether it be immersive video and RiVR as a multi-user sort of output, or is it more an interactive experience? And maybe we could do something on that side of things. And again, like some of these theme parks have got maybe IP, and we could maybe tie that IP to something with VR as well. So if we can't necessarily get it from the movie directly, but maybe the rides may have some IP that we could work with.
You guys just seem like such genuine people, man. Like when I hear about how you go about your business model, it's like you've been around the space long enough now to where you kind of have like a stable customer base and like groups that you work with. So that probably helps. But it seems like you have these two camps of like your bread and butter of these kind of emergency service and trainings where you're just kind of integrated into that space now. And those are just kind of an ongoing motion and a lot of word of mouth and like that trust you've built over the years. And now you have this other side of the business, which is we're going to go try stuff. Worst case, we try something and it was interesting and it's local and I care about it anyway. So that was fun. And best case, you then, I'm assuming you either send an email or a LinkedIn message or something to get on their radar, maybe even knock on their door to show them that POC, right? Like I'm guessing that there's how would you normally get it kind of in front of them?
Basically with the 3D printed stuff in Warwick, I'm pointing that way because it's about 50 meters that way. There's a museum that has our model inside. But it was after seeing it at Apple Park, the visitor center, where I went and watched the announcement of Vision Pro, and I was crying because it was amazing. But it was finally amazing to see Apple come on board, which meaning for me, the whole industry is going to get pushed now. Whereas before, I was like, oh, Apple will do something soon. Anyway, they did something. We found the concepts that we made in the museum at Apple Park. They had a big dome. The spaceship was there as a big model, and they were handing out iPads like sweets in this visitor center, hundreds of iPads, and everyone held it over the model, and you could disassemble the building and look inside it, and it had all the trees and all the energy consumption of the building. So we thought, let's do that for Warwick. So we did 6,000 drone photos of the town and created a 3D print. There's actually one on the wall behind me. And then we put it into the museum. But then what happened is the iPads were the window to see that model come to life. But then the church saw the same thing. And then the Lord Leicester Hospital saw the same thing. And then Leamington Spa Art Gallery and Museum saw the same thing. And they all wanted their own versions of that. So they go off and find their funding pots and come back to us with how much they've got. And that's how that's gone. The historical thing has grown organically, locally. And then we intend to take it to places like London and
beyond.
Yeah. And maybe we increase the price a little bit for London because we're doing it a little bit close prices.
Just to kind of elaborate as well on, what do we go knocking on people's doors? What do we do? We try to be as present as possible. I think that's the thing. It doesn't matter where in the world it is. We try to make sure that we touch base with as many people we speak to on LinkedIn, as many people that we have come across at events, whatever it may be, just to kind of find out whether they, are looking into something, or do they know someone that's looking into something that we could help them with. The key is just making sure that we keep, broadening out our contacts and making sure that we touch base with anyone that we've, been in contact with in the past, and making sure that their ideas of what they want to do for the future hopefully include VR, AR, or any other, XR kind of technology.
I think that's the bit where we do offer value to everyone further than what you say with the content creation, because we're seeing a massive increase in our box sales. We make the plastic boxes, the charge boxes that go alongside the headsets that we sell. So now we're just selling box only, and we do that through different people all around the world. So if they're selling hundreds of headsets, we normally see that they want to take 3 or 4 boxes to charge them and house them and protect them and transport them around. And we make them for all the different types of headsets.
Well, and these boxes are interesting. Like this, honestly, I'm haven't even heard what you're going to say yet, but I might clip this and put it at the beginning. So I feel like we're getting to the end, and this probably should have been a question I asked you much earlier. But
okay,
the boxes are interesting because it seems like this kind of all-in-one offering where like you get the box, you get the headsets, you get the multi-user without Wi-Fi, if I'm getting that correct, like the connections from the box itself or something along those lines.
Yes.
Which is huge because I go to these events and I do these demos, and you have like getting internet when you're at a large event or even talking to clients. There's so many use cases where bandwidth is an issue for these remote locations where they do a lot of the types of training you guys work with. And so it's a really interesting innovation. So maybe you could talk through kind of the high level elevator pitch and maybe some of the details around the box and this concept of offline multi-user.
Yeah, just quickly on the offline multi-user bit, that we probably don't play it enough. That's our biggest selling point for a lot of our things. People like it to be offline. So the box has its own router inside it, has a power supply, has one plug into the wall, and the router turns on, and the headsets in the box talk to the router, and the laptop that's in the box also talks to the router, and none of it talks to the internet, unless you wanted to update anything. But if you don't want to update anything, it just talks to itself. And the headsets have an MP4 for every video that's on there, on the headset, and the laptop has the MP4. So all it's streaming is the coordinates of the headset, and then overlaying it on the laptop, the same as what's in the headset. So that's basically the closed system, but that's for video sharing, and that's what people use a lot of for the boxes. But now we're obviously seeing that people like Arbor and Meta are bringing out their sort of MDM solutions to manage lots of headsets. So that's getting even more sales our way, because I see it a little bit like a printer. I'll talk about this a lot as we've got an old PlayStation on the table, but a printer, I've still got one in this room. It seems like every office needs a printer. I feel like most people will need a box of headsets in the future because it will be for training or well-being or for a bit of fun and games, after hours. They won't want to have a snake's wedding and loads of cables everywhere all over the table, charging all the headsets. They can just have one box and it has their logo in it and it looks like it's their VR box. It suits the office quite nicely. And so we're seeing a massive increase in them. And I guess that's my elevator pitch for the kits.
Mine's similar, but it's kind of, if we condense it down into something where the amount of people that I come into contact with that understand the concept of what the box can do. And if we kind of like name it like classroom in a box as an example, which is it's always been a good term to use. But I think people go, well, I've seen like hundreds of people in headsets playing the same thing at the same time. And I kind of strategically wait for that question, because I go, I'm almost certain that's using some sort of cloud-based synchronization. And then kind of going back to you, Rick, that you need bandwidth and you can't guarantee that wherever you go. You definitely don't know what it's going to be. If you're an expo, the amount of Wi-Fi connections there are just unbelievable. And we take these kits to expos all the time. If we were to rely on that and rely on those connections, we just wouldn't be able to use it. So I think the real key there is to say, you may not get as many headsets all synchronized at the same time. You may not get hundreds, but you'll get a solid amount of headsets, up to 50, I think, 55. We've pushed it further and we can probably do more, but, safe to say that you could definitely play a classroom's amount of content to people at the same time.
But that's where people don't understand that they see VR, then they see videos and they see the room scale things, imagine that classroom of 50 people if you started getting them to walk around the scenario, and go and interact with something. We're saying to all of our clients at the moment, bums on seats and just look around with your head. Imagine if they all stood up. People don't understand what that looks like if you have 50 people stand up and try and walk into each other. That's a massive issue. We roll out boxes of like 6 room scale in their own little cordoned off areas. I think there's a lot of videos need to be done around that, showing people that it's not just easy, flick the switch, do 50 people. That's going to end in tears for a lot of people.
Yeah, my side, when we're talking about a lot of people at the same time, it's definitely about the passive watching of, 360 or 180 media, not necessarily the interactive stuff. And when you do ever see classrooms full of people trying to do interactive stuff, you either have got a very small walk around space, which is very restrictive for the whole point of 6 stop, or you're almost told to keep still and teleport, which is just, again, totally against what I feel like interactive VR is about. When you want to move about, if you've got a massive space and you walk around, that's great, and not teleport. So, when we talk about these boxes, we do have both types of boxes. One with things like Quest 3s in them, where you can do both. You can have the Riverlink synchronized software for video, and you can do that kind of uniform ingestion of media so that you're all having the same training. Or you can do maybe 2 or 3 people doing some kind of interactive experience, and then sort of like, do sessions and swap it around. We're not looking to make, our customers want to try and have a huge warehouse and set out, 10 headsets at the same time doing interactive scenes.
I think the killer app for Immersive will be a seated multiplayer experience. That's my prediction. I feel like walking around, smashing into walls is not going to be the thing that takes off, but yeah, seated multiplayer immersive experience.
Is that more for commercial?
No,
for consumer.
It's for. Do you remember when we used to watch? I always go on about this. 5 years ago, we would watch VR on a plane. We would watch 2D films in a headset, in a Gear VR with noise cancelling headphones, and do 10 hours watching Game of Thrones. I watched Mandalorian recently in the same way, and what I think is going to happen is when I'm watching Star Wars and I'm landing on Hoth or whatever is the scene that I'm just landing in, I'm in a seated experience. I want to fly there. I want to have my controllers in VR. I want to land the ship, and then I want the film to carry on. I feel like Star Wars could be split into 3 and have little immersive 1-minute pieces. That would make me want to watch a film over and over again. It could bring back a load of IP to be immersive again. I shouted at Hollywood for a while about this, but we'll see if this helps.
There's a few things there I want to highlight. One is with the box. I think that it emphasizes an underrated use case for VR. I think when people talk about VR for work, they're usually talking about either distributed collaboration, which is kind of my focus of what I do at Arthur, or they're talking about like very individual kind of deep dives into very niche content. But I think the use case with the box that is interesting is it reminds us that it's not just about remote distribution. It's also people in the same environment getting access to a shared 3D space is really valuable. And I think it kind of shines a light on that, where it reminds us that we can actually do things in this medium that we can't do in person. Mm-hmm. It's not just about replicating the in-person experience in a virtual space. So I really appreciate that about that product. Mm-hmm. Not to mention just the fact that, charging and logistics, having a place to store all this stuff, having a way to travel with it and take it places, like all of that's a huge benefit too. On the other side of what you're talking about, the passive VR thing is been top of mind for me a lot. In many of my recent conversations with people, I keep thinking about how valuable and even a non-interactive VR experience is. Like the other day I was playing a game with some friends where we were just painting figurines and we're sitting around a virtual table. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 of us on different sides of the table and we're just chatting, kind of having a conversation like we are right now. And there's something about just being in the same 3D environment where it changes the types of words you say and the way that you hear each other. And we didn't need to be doing something intensive for that. And the analogy I would make is in person, when we hang out with our friends, we're not like playing football and basketball every time we hang out. Like most of what we do is go grab a drink or go grab a coffee. Like we're sitting at a table across from each other. We're watching a movie together. Like that's most of human interaction in the physical world. So in a VR environment, yes, we can do more. Yes, we can layer in other things. And yes, sometimes we still do want to play basketball, but having an immersive way for you and someone in another place or you and someone in your living room to be able to connect together passively with just a new way to intake content, that's very interesting. And I think you're onto something when you talk about that.
The evolution, if you like, of the RiVR system in XR at the moment is we have video and then we have the CSI stuff and Fire where we can move 3D models around in a virtual space. But then just imagine that in pass-through. So for education and training, and now we can see each other, but now we can just do shared experiences like we can pass each other ancient artifacts that, you know, the whole library of artifacts from somewhere. We can now look at them in a classroom and have 5 people looking at an actual object. I think mixed reality and pass-through stuff is going to be a big part of the future because people are going to say to you, would you rather completely blank out the world you're in and go into a world that you don't know, or would you rather sit here in your office and see the model in front of you and still see people around you? People are going to choose that second option. That's how things are going to go. So pass-through will be the way in the future. There'll still be, I call it full lockout VR, if you want to have that immersive experience. But it's going to be overlays on the real world and passing things around in mixed reality, I think, because just out of the choice, people are going to want to see their surroundings.
I think it's just far. Sorry, Ty. I think it's just far less intimidating to people, right?
Yeah.
Like I think when people think about headsets, again, we're talking about people that haven't tried it or spent time in it, and we got to remember they think about it so differently than we do, who've gone past that and spent hours and hours and hours in here. It's something where they associate the headset with like the Matrix and with these dystopian sci-fi experiences where humanity is being taken away. They don't associate it with good things. And so I think that makes it scary and intimidating to go into that. And then on top of it, you have to relearn super basic human interactions. Like, how do I move? How do I grab things? That's a very difficult feeling to have no control. Versus with pass-through, there's still this like familiarity where it's like, oh, I can still see the stuff I'm used to seeing. I can see you, like that scariness, I think, kind of gets removed a little bit for people.
Yeah. Definitely.
Sorry, Ty.
Good. It's good
there.
to kind of add that because it definitely adds to what I was going to say, where it's funny, we're talking about kind of how people are going to feel in one side or the other through being maybe a mixed reality experience or a VR experience. I had an experience myself recently where I was on 2 different social platforms in headsets. So I was on Engage, as we all know, and is an amazing platform for social interaction. And I was on InSpace on Vision Pro. And you have 2 very different experiences. Vision Pro is more, you can be in an immersive room, but you are still a head in a box at the moment. But, you know, it's very good. The personas are very good. So you kind of, you know, it's not the end of the world. I've not got a full body avatar in there at the moment. And we're talking and we're having some amazing shared experiences. You know, we're throwing pictures down. We've got like, as an example, when I meet people in there, you've got 2 ways to do it. You can be fully immersed in a room and it's basically like VR. And you've got this coffee table in the middle where you can throw photos into the mix. They can be stereo photos or video. You can throw 3D models onto the table. You can make them big and have a look at them. And, you know, people love like some of the polycam scans that I've done in the past. And it's great because like I am having a social experience. It is that going for a coffee kind of vibe. And I really enjoy that. The other side to InSpace is if you don't do the immersive way, it's a windowed way. So it's almost like having a flat window with all the different people in a circle around the coffee table that's on a flat sort of pane. And you're doing the exact same thing, but you still keep your surroundings around you, which is really good. So it gives you that option. But then when you go to Engage, it's the full body, maybe not as hyper realistic as we'd want it to be right now, but people love fantasy or people like to be taken away. And our good friend Chris Madsen created an amazing Halloween kind of space last night.
You were in there
I,
last
m-
night.
I,
I
m- I,
jumped in to have a
I
look at
missed
it.
it, man.
Yeah,
I
I
was
went on
planning to
to it.
go. I'm so bummed.
I was
How
only
was
in there
it?
briefly. I was only in there briefly, but I wanted to see what he'd done with it, with some of the other guys there, and pulled some amazing kind of like Halloween space out of the bag. And the one thing again, talking about fantasy, was I was like, "Where's Chris? I can't find Chris." And Chris was a skeleton.
Oh,
Uh,
I said, "It looks like you haven't eaten for a while, Chris." You know, like it was just quite a good sort of fun thing to do. So you got two different types of social experience within VR or mixed reality that work and just add to our own social interactions in the real world as well. I don't expect us all to just sit and wear headsets all day long talking to people online. I'll do both. I'll do all of it. You know, why not?
well, and I think use case matters a lot for how the medium kind of is constructed, right? So like VR chat is the extreme on one side of the spectrum where it's very cartoony. You've got infinite choice. It's a digital version of you, so you can be anything you want. You're not limited by any sort of physical limitation or imagination, really, you know? Versus in a more professional platform like what I'm doing at Arthur, it's like we want to avoid that, right? Like we're trying to create a space that is a certain mindset or certain way of thinking. And so it's more focused on trying to look as much like the real person as possible, so you feel like you're with each other. So I think there's this kind of spectrum of, based on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve, there's kind of a different design principle for the rules and kind of how you set up guide rails. We're kind of coming up on time. I want to be respectful of your guys' schedules and the fact it's a later Friday evening for you guys over in the UK. But I do have one other question, and then I'll give you a chance to plug anything you're working on. So my question is a little bit more just fun. So I think when we work on the cutting edge of things, we're inspired by science fiction as much as we're inspired by reality. If you think the first concept of a robot was actually in a book, in a sci-fi novel, it wasn't something that a scientist thought about. And then scientists read that book and were like, let's make robots. And then that inspired things like Black Mirror, right? And so it's kind of like the creative world and the science world feed off of each other. And that's kind of how humanity keeps pressing forward. So whenever I come across folks like you that work in the space and are so close to this technology, I imagine there's some science fiction that you've read or watched or been interested in the past. What's an example of a book or a movie for each of you that's inspired you or that you think about often with these technologies?
I've got to jump in before I forget about it, but I know I was mentioning things like Mandalorian and Game of Thrones and stuff like that, but as a child, for me, it was definitely Star Wars, just the original 3 Star Wars. And I think about that a lot. I think it's because I had all the toys. So because I had all the toys, we used to play in the mud and the dirt with my brothers, and I would make Hoth and Endor and all these things with the models, and then have all the different ASAT walkers and snow speeders and everything. I just feel like for me, I'm pushing that. I want to be making that, but I want to be making that in VR. And at the moment, I go regularly to different historical places and take the drone and scan big buildings, bring it into the river system and see what I can do in it. I'm constantly trying to make that sort of thing. And for me, that's where I want to do more. I think we can do more storytelling, like Submerged, but let's have a little bit of 3D. Let's have a bit of 3D assets coming out of the screen a little bit. Like, I was disappointed to feel that maybe they're saving it. Maybe Apple are saving it for the next thing. Or maybe we should do it, where we merge 3D 180 with some 3D models. And I feel like it's wasted that if there's anyone, any Netflix show, any HBO show that's not shooting 3D 180 behind the scenes content of their next show, then they're missing a trick, because you can literally stick the lens on a camera and just film everyone doing the behind the scenes and have it as a 20-minute documentary. We're ready to fly. Let's go. We can do it for you. That's my little pitch to everyone. We'll come and teach you how to do it.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit of a movie buff. I do love watching movies because, again, you know, you get to see things that maybe aren't going to be real in my lifetime. So I think the two that stick out to me when I was a kid was Back to the Future. Love Back to the Future. You know, anyone that's a kid of the 80s loves the idea that you could have this time machine. But the thing that I like about both that and my other film that I love the most, which is Ghostbusters, is kind of the lo-fi element of these things. It's like they stuck a time machine or created a time machine out of a DeLorean car, you know, which at the time was probably pretty futuristic. But realistically now you look at it and kind of go, what's the perception of, someone that's in their kind of like teens or early 20s watching Back to the Future now for the first time? They'll go, oh, look at this old car. It's a time machine. It's still cool. I love it.
You better make a new one.
But then with Ghostbusters, and that's kind of had a bit of a reboot in the last few years as well. Like the gear that they used back in the 80s was just like thrown together and sort of like, how can we use this for obviously a fantasy reason? The idea of catching ghosts and stuff like that is a bit wild. And I think in some ways it kind of draws me into kind of how we as a company in RiVR are making our own stuff. It may be, boxes or rigs or things like that. We're trying to create things that allow us to do stuff maybe other people haven't done or haven't thought of or haven't actually executed very well. So I like that side. And that grew my love of technology into sort of like the bleeding edge stuff. But I think obviously the big ones in more recent years are going to be things like Ready Player One, the idea of it's going to be wherever you want, or the Matrix, going back to the original Matrix. That first one was just mind blowing.
I was so excited for the Ready Player One VR experience. Then I was so disappointed that we went to Vegas and they launched they said the Vive had it in their booth, and we went down to like the hotel to see it. I put it on my head. I was just gutted, like so gutted. I wanted to be dancing in the bar and floating around the air, and it was nothing. It was like some weird teleconference with someone live on the other side of the world. Weird.
I think that these things, I'm surprised that nothing really well has been done for those type of IPs.
Yeah.
I think Alex is the one that's desperate clearly to want to do it. So someone give him some budget and he'll probably make something pretty good.
Yeah,
it's
this
like,
is the
last little bit. It's like, do you remember when you had DVDs back in the day and you'd go to the extras on the DVD and you'd have a few things? That's what we want to make, but immersive.
I love that you said that, because that is completely under talked about. I was going to be done, but I want to just piggyback on that rant for 30 seconds. When I was a kid watching DVDs, not only was there extras and behind the scenes and these like cool little bonus features, right, that got people excited, there were games. And we played those games. Like, I remember Lion King 1.5 or 2.5 or something like that, where it's the story of Timon and Pumbaa, and it goes through kind of a different segment of the story.
Yeah.
They had all of these little mini games of like meerkats and like trying to do trivia and the bugs eating stuff. And I still remember that years and years later. And that's not something that we see. I think Netflix tried to do like some mobile games, and I haven't seen it kind of take off yet. But a lot of people are starting to watch these movies on their headsets or even on their PS5s or on their computers, like a gaming PC. I think the integration of gaming IP, regardless of whether it's in headset or not, that needs to keep happening. I think the bonus feature mini games is like, there's a huge opportunity for that to keep growing.
I mean, let's not shout at Netflix too much in case we just have a whole Netflix section of this podcast. But Netflix, you had a VR app. I don't know if they still have the VR app, but it was... they stopped the VR app that was on Gear VR. It was on Oculus. They literally were showing their 2D content inside the app. All I wanted was to be able to offline download in the app so I could watch films on the planes. And within that environment, they could have literally handed me a sword or handed me a gun, and I could have shot a few things. They could have updated the app with another gig or whatever on the download and made that a room scale little thing. Let's do it, Netflix.
Even if they don't hand it to you, even if it was just sitting on the coffee table and you could grab it, like little thing would go a long way. But
they would have beaten Apple on immersive spaces. Like immersive spaces, they have immersive spaces for Star Wars films and stuff inside Apple. They could have done that inside Gear VR.
The issue is the chicken and the egg scenario, isn't it? Because of the user bases that are using these devices, to them, they don't think it's vast. And the reality is that you just need someone. And I think maybe we thought that Apple may take the bull by the horns and just throw, and they probably are throwing billions at it, but it still needs more. And I think from that standpoint, it's more about showing people that you should tie some amazing IP to things to draw them in. I've seen. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is that it's that chicken and egg scenario where you go, well, I'm not going to invest in it now because there's not enough eyes on it. It's like, no. It's the like build it and they'll come thing. It should be that. And I think that then we will see more people wowed by things that they're familiar with, not things that they don't really know about.
Well, it's the same. It gets people confused. When we were at, was it CES and the one body problem or whatever the thing?
Three body
Problem. They
Great
had a big,
job.
massive booth at CES
Yeah.
last year or the year before.
This year.
And they had a real big exclusive thing, like come in and get in the big queue and come in and have a look at this experience. I didn't bother, but Ty did. But the whole premise of the film or the program is putting something on your head and experiencing another world. What a perfect way to use VR to advertise. Great. They didn't. They just put 2D.
No, it was
inside the headset.
it was the headset that they use in the movie.
Yeah.
Obviously a prop version of it, and I think they kind of retrofitted in some sort of X-Real type glasses into them.
And they showed a
It
panel.
was just a trailer. It was just the trailer.
Well, so
film.
there's not even anything immersive. They could have had 3D 180 just to be behind the scenes, but it was just 2D flat in front of you in a retrofit helmet.
It was a blindfold for a rotating stage. So you were 5 people sat on the seats, and it rotated the stage. And you went from a black room to obviously what was on the other side of the space they built, which showed another screen, and you carried on watching the video on a projector on the screen in front of you.
When I was in LA, I literally drove down to Netflix and popped out a QR code, an AR model in front of their building, and did like a video. She was like, come on, speak to me. It takes so much hard work just to try and have a conversation with them. We'll see if this helps.
Yeah, that breaks my heart because I love that show, and I think that show did a lot of good for the industry because it's such a well-produced kind of modern story that like not a lot of people in the US at least have read the book, right? Like I think it's a Chinese sci-fi.
Yeah.
So getting to retell that story in a way that resonates with this really wide audience, I think did good for the industry. So it bums me out they didn't follow through on a really strong activation that ties into this tech. But guys, this conversation has been so fun. Like I said earlier, I think both of you come across as like very genuine people that obviously are very passionate and care about the tech and what it can be used for, how this can tell stories and really get people to lean in to the information we present to them. So excited to share this story and kind of feature it for folks. I think the thing we'll end it with here is just giving you an opportunity to plug anything you're working on. Outside of pitching to Disney or Amazon, I think my number one takeaway is anyone investing or wanting to create a VR immersive film, these are the guys to talk to about it. But otherwise, maybe if there's anything else you guys want to share, what would that be?
Well, just one of my notes here was if you wanted to look at a bad experience or how not to do an experience, I wrote down Gorilla Tag. Have you ever played that inside a headset? Oh my God. We've got like a lot of kids between us. And when we take the headsets around to my brother's house, there's like 7 kids all playing Gorilla Tag. And I just wanted to say that if anyone's ever going to do a demo, just don't do that in front of grandparents because that is just going to make you, they're going to think it's worse than a mobile phone in a kid's face.
$100 million though, man.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
For the right groups, definitely it's a win. But I think that I saw someone post something recently on LinkedIn. They were saying that we're at a stage now where motion sickness isn't a thing, and I'm like, I think that's depending on what content you put on the headset and let them play first as a first impression. But I think for me, it's just everyone has their own tolerances really, and that's the problem with doing things broadly. Hence why it was always really easy for RiVR to stick with immersive video, and that's what I'll probably say as a kind of a bit of a pitch is that I work within the video department of RiVR. I'm passionate about immersive video. I think that RiVR Link as a product is a great way to deploy that as an output. I think anybody who's looking to start looking at VR who are new or don't know where to go as a starting point is a great one. And then you can just evolve it into more interactive if you want to.
You say stage 1, stage 2?
Yeah, obviously. And then I'm obviously going to pitch a vision experiment because that's my YouTube channel.
Do it.
It's in its infancy. It's only a few months in, but doing really, really well. It's definitely going to broaden out into more sort of spatial computing on top of Apple Vision Pro's sort of current path and where it will go into maybe more product line broadening out by Apple in the future, hopefully. I think that there's definitely a lot to talk about that. I don't like the idea of anyone kind of comparing it to the low end to the high end. I feel like that's a poor comparison, but it's going to be done forever. So
yeah, if you want to have a chat about Vision Pro, just go to Ty's YouTube channel and write a few comments on there. He'll definitely reply. He's really engaged with all of them. But you can probably have a load of headsets like this if you keep doing Vision Pro.
Well, yeah, and I think it's good to have a resource for people. Like, I know that there are accounts that started and wanted to kind of like get across what they wanted to get across, but I think that with a lot of people sort of maybe sort of fading on their love for it because they're not in this world, they bought it as just an extra piece of tech in their life. I want to keep it going. I want to keep driving all of it, you know, not just Vision Pro, but all of it, and making sure people are aware of the differences between the high end of standalone to the low end. It's not just purely, you know, this is $3,500 and this is $200, and you know, this is the better headset because of the price. It's not necessarily that. There are pros and cons to everything.
And my final push, I think, is I'm just going to say Polycam because I'm just addicted to Polycam. I'm scanning with my mobile phone using Polycam on iOS. I use it every day. I upload from Polycam straight to Sketchfab, which is now changed into Fab. And me and Ty have competitions on there where we sell quite a lot of models through Sketchfab and then hopefully Fab. But that is such an easy pipeline for me, from phone to website and nothing in between. I think we sell not loads, but maybe 10, 15 models a month.
You see our rivalry. We, you know, not to tread on any toes, but when we do our own podcasts from time to time, they're not as often as we'd like them to be. You'll see the rivalry there.
I love it. No, this is great, guys. You're some of the most well-rounded people I think I've talked to in the industry. Like, you've got a really wide breadth of knowledge. You have a couple focused use cases for the business, but I love that you have offerings around each stage of the funnel, from the content creation to the content licensing to preset all-in-one package, easy to get started with sorts of packages. And then also the creative fun, just like we want to create for us too and for our community. Like, you guys hit all these different pieces of what you can do with the tech. So everybody who's listening, if you've made it through an hour and a half here, guys, thank you for listening all the way through. If you've made it, give Alex and Ty a follow on LinkedIn and all the different things they just talked about with the YouTube channel and Polycam, etc. We'll throw some links down in the description so it's nice and easy. But otherwise, guys, that's the pod.
I'm Meta Rick.